Unraveling the complex chains tied around prisoners of war is the key to freeing our future and current prisoners of war from the captive of injustice. Good morning, my name is Sofia Darawi.
I'm Nicholas Spanos.
I'm Stephen Lindsay.
And I am Sarah Correa, and this is the prerequisites and impacts of the mistreatment of prisoners of war. Our research question is, what are the intentions behind how the US, Asia, and Europe treated prisoners of war during the 20th and 21st century, and what are the long-term effects of it? Our response for that is that prisoners of war will take advantage by the countries that held them captive and was physically and mentally damaged in the long term. We are going to focus on the context, the historical context behind the mistreatments, justification, the political and religious mindset of a nation, and also consequences, the physical and mental impacts of the mistreatment and ethical concerns.
In the US, during the Korean War, the US Army instilled re-education camps meant to re-educate Korean prisoners into loving democracy and hating communism. An issue with this was that the guiding principle behind this was the idea of manifest destiny, which focused on the belief that the United States was a leading country which had the right and the moral duty and responsibility to mistreat and also spread their ideas to the rest of the world, namely non-whites, including Koreans, according to Tovey. In Japan, the idea of an honorable death focused and it was shaped by the idea of seppuku, ritual samurai suicide. Because of this, the Japanese believed that any prisoner of war that surrendered to them, rather than dying at the face of defeat, was automatically a person with no rights or status, and the Japanese could take advantage of them in any way they saw fit, according to Ariati. In Russia, the idea of the Russian idea focuses on the belief that Russians are never intruders, but are simply spreading their ideas to the rest of the world, and are a divinely guided nation which has the right to do so, according to Moran. However, a consequence of this, according to the United Nations, is that Ukrainian prisoners of war currently are experiencing torture, ill treatment, as well as captive pregnant prisoners of war. As we can see in this poster of a propaganda poster by the United States, labeled as the Red Iceberg, Uncle Sam is looking disapprovingly at multiple communist nations and describing them as a challenge that the United States must face. As we can see in this image of Soviet propaganda, we can see Vladimir Lenin, quote, cleansing the earth of filth, and other ideas such as capitalism and American ideas. An issue with morally justifying mistreatment is that once it has been morally justified, politicians now have the gateway open to them to mistreat prisoners of war and take advantage of them in any way they see fit, including through economically and prisoner of war labor camps. As we can see in this image here of the Thai-Burma Railway, there are Australian prisoners of war being forced to work on the front lines by the Japanese. On this Thai-Burma Railway, 8,000 Australian prisoners of war died from ill treatment, lack of food, and torture. Additionally, in German labor camps, in one single shelling by enemy artillery, 6 Russians were killed and 23 were wounded in a single shelling by enemy artillery.
As for the ethical consequences that derive from prisoner of war mistreatment and dehumanization, there are 3 main ones. The first being malnutrition. This is evident in Command 1 Philippines in World War II at Japanese camps where American and Filipino prisoners of war had low amounts of food, water, and medical care, further increasing the death toll of the camps. This lack of regard for human life serves as one example of dehumanization over the course of history. Another ethical factor that derives from prisoner of war mistreatment is the physical and mental abuse. In World War II, at a Japanese camp, an Australian prisoner of war reported multiple incidents of physical brutality against him, even though he remembered only being hit once. His first-hand accounts of physical abuse and his loss of memory serve as another reason why prisoner of war mistreatment must be more recognized and changed. America is not so perfect when it comes to the way it treats its prisoners of war either. In fact, the conditions they set themselves in are amongst the worst. In 2002, a man by the name of David Hicks was taken prisoner of war for alleged affiliation with the Taliban. It is here that he was placed incommunicado in a cage where there was no windows or sunlight. And this serves as one example of how America dehumanizes prisoners of war.
During the World Wars, economic desperation led to a rise in both dictatorships and violence. The picture I'm screening out for you today is of the Bataan Death March. Japanese soldiers actually captured Filipino and US troops and made them walk 65 miles to their prison camp. On the way there, 5,000 to 10,000 Filipino soldiers died, and 600 to 650 US troops also died on the way there, with no food or water. The proxy war between the Soviet Union and US actually fought in Vietnam. The picture right here is of a tiger cage. What's a tiger cage, you might ask? A tiger cage is a 5-foot high, 9-foot wide cell that is used as a torture device by the Vietnamese. The cell has barbed wire on it, so the victim's skin would actually prick on the actual cell. The Vietnamese would actually pour salt water on the cage to make sure that the wounds hurt even more. After 9/11, after 9/11, paranoia grew because after 9/11, there's an increase in hate crimes and after 9/11, there's an increase in hate crimes and stereotypes due to Islamic people due to 9/11. The picture right there is of Guantanamo Bay. Guantanamo Bay was actually built in 1952 by Fidel Castro in Cuba, but is now used by Americans for Iraq and Afghanistan detainees. Guantanamo Bay is very infamous for its very cruel and unusual punishments, such as force feeding, sleep, sound deprivation, and waterboarding.
Due to the cruel treatments that prisoners of war received, this results in several long-term effects, mainly on their health, which are mental health, which includes post-traumatic stress disorder, hallucination, and also persistent dissociation. Physical health, which includes psychiatric and psychosomatic symptomatology, functional problems, and also life disabilities. And finally, emotional health, which includes depression, anxiety, and also suicidal ideation. As you can see on these images, the first one is a clear example of mental health. As you can see, the soldier has a fixed stare, which is a result of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. The second image is a clear example of physical health. As you can see, the soldier cannot even walk by himself due to the tortures that he received. And finally, emotional health. As you can see on the last image, the soldier is crying a lot because he cannot endure anymore the tortures that he is receiving. Also, Ms. Menita Dukik agrees that the mistreatments that prisoners of war received were a key factor from them to develop several long-term health problems on them, mainly post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. As you can see on this graph, this shows the percentage of PTSD symptoms on prisoners of war during the years after the World War II. As you can see, the percentage decreased, but it's never zero, which shows that prisoners of war still suffer health problems even after so many years from their captivity.
As a group, we came up with these possible solutions that we need to come together as one despite our views to unite as humanity. Because we all are one. And with supernatural organizations such as UNICEF and the United Nations, we can come together to make laws to protect future prisoners of war.
There are several limitations when it comes to these possible solutions, the first being that supranational organizations such as the United Nations can create laws to protect prisoners of war from such mistreatment. However, these laws can always be broken. These organizations can also create safe havens for civilians surrounding the conflict zones. However, they can't directly intervene with the conflicts themselves.
Because of these limitations, we decided our chosen solution should be to be able to take out the actual root of the problem itself, the normalization of violence and the dehumanization of people. We must understand the different perspectives and ideologies of different people, regardless of how they look or regardless of how they think. By understanding the different perspectives of different people, we will be able to stop normalizing violence and end the dehumanization of prisoners of war. However, an issue with this is that there will always be someone who chooses to be racist, someone who actually forgets the important perspectives of other people and forgets to include them as a member of society and of humanity. However, we cannot let people like this take power, such as politicians, and take advantage of our weaknesses and be able to divide us and conquer us due to this. And here's our works cited.
All right, Stephen, we'll start with you and we'll work our way across.
Are you going to pause the timer? Sorry.
No, it'll stop on its own, don't worry about it. All right, Stephen, how did your group decide to include Nico's perspective in your overall presentation?
We decided to include Nico's art about that, his ethical producing, so that we can actually see how brutal and immoral the actual treatment that prisoners were going through during the actual wars and how unethical it was.
All right, thanks. Reflecting on the work of all your colleagues, which one had the greatest impact on your understanding of the topic you guys selected?
For me, Sarah had the greatest impact due to the fact that she analyzed the actual long-term effects. So that way we can understand how this problem never actually fades over time. Though it does decrease slightly, we need to actually solve this problem and solve it now due to how urgent it is and how these impacts last for a long period of time after these wars or conflicts.
All right. Nico, what's a way that your team's solution makes you think differently about the research you conducted?
I believe that my team solution made me think differently about the research I conducted, because when you think of humanity as all as one, it shouldn't matter, like where you come from. So when I researched about the ethical consequences, I realized how more immoral and wrong it was for such treatment to take place.
All right. And Sarah, if you had another team member, what perspective or limitation could they have reached that would have made a contribution to this presentation?
We would have had a more futuristic perspective, so we can analyze better what in the future would be the treatment of prisoners of war due to the development of technologies, mainly biometrics and AI technology, which could worsen treatments of prisoners of war or even make it better, depending on what could happen in the future.